Veterans of the Valley. I'm Tom Turbeville. This is indeed a special Veterans of the Valley because instead of visiting with a veteran, Aggie head football coach Mike Sherman and I are going to talk about those who are serving our country right now. In May, Coach Sherman, with the tremendous help of the Aggie Network, had the opportunity to visit the 72nd Infantry Brigade Combat Team in Iraq to see firsthand the work of the brave men and women there and to get a personal view of the day-to-day challenges that they endure while proudly wearing American military uniforms. And as you can guess, he met plenty of Aggies on his 6-day stay that took him from Kuwait to Camp Adder, to Camp Victory, to Camp Prosperity, to Camp Cropper. As he wrote in his journal, he discovered the outstanding leadership we have in Iraq, the horrible quality of life the Iraqi people endured for so many years under Saddam Hussein before we got there, and the passion that our military has for their job and their service, and yes, the passion they have for Aggie football. Please welcome our head football coach, Mike Sherman, to talk not about football, but about the trip that he says he'll remember the rest of his life. Coach, thanks for visiting with us. Thank you for the trip that you took. First off, on behalf of all Americans, thank you for that trip. You wrote in your journal about that these men and women are fighting to keep the opportunities that we have every day, to enjoy our families, to go to our churches, to things as mundane as just to go out to eat or go watch a football game. And you talked about how really that your opportunity was made even more significant because you got to represent a school with such a great military tradition as Texas A&M. That really did even give it more of a significance, didn't it?
It did, because the original plan was try to be over there for muster, which is certainly one of the greatest traditions in A&M history. And when we weren't able to do that because of the volcano, we had to go 2 weeks later. To be able to go over there and meet and greet with our service people, Aggies, Longhorns, Baylor Bears, whoever, it was quite an honor to be able to go do that. And as I said in the journal, it's something I will remember the rest of my life.
Talk a little bit about sort of how the idea for this trip. It actually really came around the first part of the year, really after the football season ended, that you had the idea, and an Aggie emailed you and said, hey, Coach, why don't you come for muster? And instead of you just saying, oh, we don't have time, your immediately response was, yes, let's get it done.
Well, it's funny, after the first of the year, I just kind of was in a reflective state, and it was after a recruiting weekend, and just kind of thinking about my life and how fortunate I've been in my life to be able to do the things I do at a place that I love doing it, and with I have my great family, all 5 of my kids here in College Station. We live a very good life here, and I felt very fortunate. And I do a lot of reading of history books and political books and the state of our country and our world, and reading about the war in Iraq and how we're doing over there in Afghanistan and so forth. And just felt I wanted to go express my gratitude to the people over there that have allowed me an opportunity to live the life that I live, and feel very fortunate.
As a football coach, you're obviously keeping an eye on how people coach, how people respond to coaching, how teamwork works, how leadership works. And you were able to take those ideas and those viewpoints that you've had your whole professional career and those things that you look for your whole professional career, and you were really able to use them over there and witness teamwork and leadership.
Yeah, when I sat down and talked with Lieutenant General Cohn, who used to be at Fort Hood, and General Ordinero, who's in charge of our campaign over there in Iraq, they were the ones that would always bring the football analogy into play, and the teamwork, and that they would study football. And actually, Lieutenant General Cohn used to come to my practices when I was a head coach in Green Bay and watch us practice and how we drilled things and apply it to his world. Well, I went over there and tried to take something from their world into mine. And the one thing that was so evident was the lack of egos. You would think with the number of generals that I met, lieutenant generals, colonels, it would be an ego-centered type of group of people, and nothing but the sort. They're very much about their team, their players, their soldiers who are out there on reconnaissance missions, risking their lives, and the respect and the pride they had in their team, and how they talked about the men and women that served them under them in a very positive manner. And they talked a lot about the brotherhood, the chemistry, kind of like we talk about the spirit of Aggieland and Aggieland.
Yes.
They talked about a brotherhood that you have when you're in battle and someone beside you on either side is protecting your backside, and the trust factor that you have in that person and the bond that you build with that person is so special, something that we try to create in a football locker room.
Mm-hmm. Other people that I've talked to that have been over there to visit on missions such as yours, they always realized when they were over there that they were the lucky ones. In a week, they were going to be home putting their head on their pillows at home. Did it always, I guess that never left you, the idea that you were going to be leaving people behind that yearned for that but still had a job to do before they were ever going to get to do with it, what you were going to be able to do, and that is go home?
There's a lot to that, you know, the selflessness of the people and how over there and talking to them about their jobs and about the risk that they're taking, and all they could talk about was it's not about us, it's about our families back home who are worrying about us. Mm-hmm. You know, and you have to understand that when you talk to one soldier and you visit with him or her, that there's a wife or a husband back home, a mom or a dad, there may be kids back home, uncles, all worried about their daily activities. They're not worried over there. You know, they think they'll stay out of harm's way. But as a parent or a husband or a wife, you're worried. And so I think the extension of the sacrifice crosses from there to here, where we have families over here you don't even think about, that are worried about their relative that's over there serving, and the sacrifice that they make emotionally, financially, to be able to allow one of their family members to serve our country.
You talked about the original plan was to be there for muster. That didn't work because, and you actually got the call as bags were packed and you were heading out the door to be there originally. You got the call that because of the that 16-letter named volcano that I won't try to pronounce, I won't ask you to either, that your trip had to be canceled for 2 weeks, and you asked about and you talked about how the Aggie Network came together again to make this happen 2 weeks later, and this was an Aggie Network that included everybody at A&M, people not only that's here, but extending all the way to Secretary Gates, our former Texas A&M president. Everybody had a hand in sort of making this thing happen 2 weeks later.
They did. You know, to be able to pull it off the first time for a private citizen to go over there, not with the USO, but on your own, and to be able to connect the dots and be able to do all that I was able to do is impossible. It was only through the Aggie Network that this was able to happen. And then when it was canceled, you know, a lot of people said, well, you know, you'll just have to go with everybody else in the USO group. And we had already set an itinerary and had planned to meet certain groups of people. So it was important to me that we get this thing done the way we originally planned. And the Aggies just picked up the ball and ran with it and connected all the dots for me, and we got it done 2 weeks later. And it was remarkable that it was able to be able to see it to fruition because of all the people that had to sign off on this.
I'm going to ask you a question that I know that you've been asked before, and maybe you haven't really had a chance to think about it a lot, but maybe you have. You're going to be gathering your guys together here in a few weeks for the start of practice, for the start of the football season here coming up in August. Have you thought about how you're going to use your experiences, how you're going to use what you learned in this 6 days of your life, how you're going to use it to become a better football coach and hopefully to make them become not just better football players but better people, how you'll be able to take what you learned and use it not only this fall but for the rest of your career?
I have. You know, I actually, while I was over there, in every situation that I was presented with, it was a learning experience for me. And when you sit down with the top generals in our country and you see the leadership that they have and how they represent themselves, and I was just so proud to be an American sitting in a room with a group of officers, and the way they talked about the soldiers that were working under them, and their passion on the mission that they were placed in Iraq. I was just in awe. I was like a little kid in a candy store. We're talking about teamwork, we're talking about brotherhood, chemistry, loyalty, trust, integrity, all the things that A&M and hopefully our football team will represent on this football field. So a lot of the things that I learned over there will be applied to our season. And at some points I'll share, I haven't shared anything with our team just yet, but I'll share some of those experiences with them because I think they're worth sharing. I was able to meet a very special group of people, and it would be selfish of me to keep it to myself. I need to share that with these kids and let them understand just what's happening with young men and women their age over there on a daily basis, them getting up and protecting us, allowing us an opportunity to go play a football game.
Well, you've got a lot of great leadership on your football team that's coming in already, and I know that the lessons of leadership that you learned will make them even better leaders. So that's going to help them, again, not just as football players, not just on Saturdays,
Right.
but Monday through Friday, Monday through every week for the rest of their lives. It's going to help them. You were asked about what was the day-to-day routine once you got there, and you said that no day was routine. Everything was a little different other than it started early and it ended late. Sort of talk a little bit about what was the typical day, if there was a typical day.
Well, just getting in there, I didn't get into Camp Adder until about 3:30 in the morning, and the guys I were working a night shift, so they were a little hungry, so we went over to the mess hall. And it was very difficult to get in there. Now you have Peruvian guards. They contract outside people to be at the guard posts. So it wasn't quite easy. I mean, the security is at all-time highs, but I was able to get in. We had something to eat. Went to bed in what they call a CHU, a contained housing unit. And that was a luxury apartment for most soldiers, for me to be staying in there. So I was very fortunate. There wasn't much to it, very rudimentary. There was a bed, a TV, and a shared shower. But then we get up and we traveled around to different sites. Matter of fact, southern Iraq looks a lot like West Texas. There's a dust bowl ready to happen at any second. And what I did basically was just travel around and greet and meet, and sometimes I was asked to speak to troops collectively as a group, other times just to meet different people and sit down with generals, and had an opportunity to break up their day a little bit, some of the monotony I think that they're faced with on a daily basis. I think I was just there to break that a little bit. But I've had chances to go inside some of the fusion cells where their intelligence gathering, where I was in one situation, one room, where in that room they had the capability of identifying any ground movement, anybody digging a hole at any place in Iraq. I mean, our surveillance over there is just phenomenal across that country. So every day, like I said, it was different. It was enlightening, and the thing that I just every night when I went to bed and thought about the day, it was the people I met that were just so special, and the sacrifice, the selflessness, the lack of complaining, which I will share that with our players when we go into two-a-days. You know, they think it's hot during two-a-days. It's 132 degrees over there in the shade. So, and these guys are walking around with helmets and armored vests on. So we won't have too much sympathy for our guys when they're in two-a-days. But
your players might not be as excited
no,
about
they
this
won't
trip
be.
as you.
They kind of hope I didn't. They're going to wish I didn't go when it's all said and done. But then at the end of the day, I usually ended up with an Aggie function where Aggies would get together. In one situation, I actually was able to show our spring. Well, two times I actually showed the spring game, talked them through some of the technical aspects of the football spring game, and told them what the state of the union was at A&M, what we were doing back here. So it just broke up their monotony a little bit, and I think they enjoyed that part.
Let's take a look at some photographs. We have quite a few photographs to show you. These are available, by the way, on the website of AggieAthletics.com if you want to see them. And there's a lot more actually available there than we're going to show you here, but here are a few of them. It's been a couple of months since you've been there, so I took some notes on what some of these photographs.
Okay.
This is at Victory Base in Baghdad. I guess this is one of your initial addresses to some of the folks.
Well, actually, when I was in Baghdad, I actually stayed. This is a hunting palace that Saddam Hussein would keep his guests. Right behind all those soldiers was a huge lake, which was filled with all kinds of tropical fish and game fish that he would allow his guests to fish with. I actually slept right in this building right here when I was in Baghdad. It was pretty luxurious. A lot of the rooms were very ornate with gold trim on the furniture and in the bathrooms with the fixtures and whatnot. But this is just a group. We had a Texas-style barbecue, and at the end of it, I had a chance to talk to the troops. This is a mixture of NFL, college, fans that just want to ask questions, and I just basically was thanking them for their service and what they were doing.
Great. Let's move on. This is General Ordinero.
Yes, sir.
Talk about him. I know that he was one of the people you were very much looking forward to meeting and sitting down with.
Well, this is just a special leader in our country. He's in charge of the entire campaign over in Iraq. And when other soldiers and other lieutenant generals talked about General Ordinero, they talked with tremendous respect. This guy had instincts beyond anybody else, that he knew the people in Iraq. He had spent more time over there than anybody. He had a pulse on the nation. And sitting down and talking with him, we talked about teamwork, we talked about leadership. His son actually came to A&M to visit, and he actually wanted his son to come to A&M. He came with him, enjoyed the campus, thought it was one of the most friendly places he's ever been, but he followed his dad's footsteps, and he went to the next best place, which was West Point. So I guess he didn't do too poorly.
I like that.
But just a great man, and I'm really excited to meet him and to share some conversation with him.
You talked in your journal about the opulence of Saddam Hussein, and I think this shows a little bit of it. This is the Al Fal Palace. Am I pronouncing that right?
It is.
Talk about that, because you see opulence all around you in that picture.
There is. Some of it's been bombed out, but this right here stayed put, and this is where the headquarters was, where General Ordinero kept his staff. But outside this is all kinds of water surrounding these palaces, and there's multiple palaces in Iraq in this area. And the Ba'ath Party and Saddam Hussein and his family lived in these compounds, and the Iraqi people had no idea that these leaders were living to this extravagance. And so there was a story that he actually shut the water off in Iraq, where the people didn't have water for 3 or 4 days, so he could fill up his pond and then put fish in it. Wow. So it tells you a little bit about what the mindset was with the leadership in Iraq. But this is just in the lobby of that palace.
What are you looking at there? Is that a statue? It looks like a horse, or like a statue of...
It's a statue of a warrior on a horse.
Warrior on a horse, right. And this is, again, at Victory Base, and I guess you're just standing out, just visiting with some of the soldiers there.
Yeah, we talked, and everybody wants to get a picture, an autograph, and we were able to accommodate.
Next picture was an event that meant a lot to you, and I want you to talk about. This also is at Victory Base outside the palace, and this is a photograph. If we can move on to the next one, and there it is. You're raising the Stars and Stripes, the American flag.
Well, this was neat, and I didn't know they were going to do this, but the party that traveled around with me presented me with the flag, and the opportunity to raise that flag over the city of Baghdad from this palace was quite an extraordinary event for me personally. And I'm able to take that flag back down, and I have it in my office here in the Bright Building in College Station. And
I bet it'll be there for as long as you are.
Yeah, it's a long time, hopefully.
A long time. Again, this looks like a basement part in the basement of the palace, and you're sort of visiting with some Aggies and signing some gear and stuff like that?
Yeah, actually, this is kind of on the outskirts of the base, and we just had an Aggie night, and this is where we did watch the spring game this night and sign autographs, and everybody would come up and would visit a little bit. Felt kind of like Santa Claus. Their days are kind of long, and anything different to change the monotony of the day. I think any soldier would appreciate the fact that anybody that comes in there, they just want to see and talk and see what's going on back home and whatnot. So that's what this was all about.
You took a lot of gear with you, I know. You took a lot of Green Bay gear, you took a lot of Aggie gear, and a lot of things like that.
Well, I tell you, before we went, we asked Green Bay and the Houston Texans as well, and I took a bunch of hats from Texas A&M, and we tried to accommodate as many fans as we could. The Texas National Guard is a huge influence over there, and so we had a lot of fans from the state of Texas. We also there was a National Guard unit, an engineering group from La Crosse, Wisconsin. And so we had Packer fans and Viking fans, and it was interesting to have Viking fans come up and get a Packer hat. And they would ask me about Brett Favre's coming back, and they want him back, and the Green Bay Packer fans were hoping he wouldn't come back. And so it was kind of fun pitting the two against each other. So we had a lot of fun talking football.
This is at Camp Victory Base, sitting down to a meal. Was the food okay? Something you wouldn't want on a daily diet?
No, I'll tell you what, I thought the food was pretty good. I think they knew going in that was an important part for these soldiers to be fed well, and I would say the food was much better than I expected it to be.
This is you with one of the Iraqi generals.
Actually, he has a son at Texas A&M, and
I see.
He is a friend of our vice president of student affairs, and I actually carried a message to him. And,
from General Weber?
From General Weber, that's right. Exactly right.
Right.
But yeah, he was telling me we need to start winning more football games. I didn't understand anything else. I didn't understand anything else, but I understood that.
That wasn't General Weber telling him to tell you that.
Well, it probably was General Weber. Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about that.
This is at Camp Cropper, and I want you to talk about this because you talked about certain elements of your trip that were a little bit dicier than others, and this is you coming off of Black Hawk. Talk about that trip.
Well, you get to the airport and they have you put these earplugs in, and then you put all this equipment on. Put the earplugs in, you put the equipment on, you can't hear anything because the Blackhawks make so much noise, plus you have earplugs in. So apparently they told me not to sit on a certain side of the helicopter because they call that the hurricane seat, because the wind comes through the helicopter at such an extreme rate. Well, I did happen to sit there, much to their enjoyment, I'm sure, and my sunglasses came off of my head. I just had bought them. The other part of the thing was I gave him a hard time. I mean, I said, do y'all have a double XL on these military vests? I'm not sure I'm covering enough of my body with this thing, and plus the helmet didn't fit. And I said, y'all look pretty like your stuff fits. I said, aren't you worried that my stuff doesn't fit? Well, anytime you go up in the air and you're flying over Baghdad, obviously you're in a more precarious position than you're just sitting on the base. So that's why we wore the extra gear.
Wow, that was a great photograph. Camp Cropper. This was another base that you went to. What are we looking at there?
Well, Camp Cropper is where they held all the detainees, and it was just in the news recently. This is where they kept Saddam Hussein before he was executed. But these men and women, for the most part, are guarding the prisoners over there. And I believe I just read in the news recently that we turned this base or this facility, or are turning this facility back over to the Iraqis so they can run their own prison system.
And that's another from Camp Cropper.
Yes, it is. And we have a bunch of Aggies there with Aggie hats on, so it's kind of neat.
Camp Prosperity here. This is a bombed-out palace, is that right?
Yes, it is. We had a chance to walk through some of the military strategy that we had was in bombing out. Saddam Hussein was trying to find him and hitting him where it hurts, and these are a couple of places that were bombed out by us, by our, I believe, smart bombs that came down and with GPS was able to target exactly where we wanted to hit. Looks like your house after a post-game party.
Just a little bit, but just that photograph, that's just it's a very significant photograph. I wanted to include this because this is one of the young men who is responsible for the photographs that we're seeing here. He was one of the photographers. This is First Lieutenant Darrell Frost, who is a graduate of the University of Texas, and but you became good friends with him, and I think you actually got a little Aggie in him, I believe.
Well, I tell you what, he was a little jealous of the Gigams and the brotherhood and the Aggie spirit that was demonstrated throughout the week, and I think he saw something special there that was unique to Texas A&M, and he's a great guy, and he was very generous with his time, and really helped me throughout the trip. So I'm very appreciative of him.
He was a public affairs officer, so he had
Yes,
a
he
lot to do with you getting where you needed to be and seeing who you needed to see, and not to mention these photographs, although most of the photographs were taken by a young lady we'll see in the next picture on the left. That's Sergeant Melissa Shaw, and then sort of the PIO, I guess, the information officer is on the right, and that's PFC Jennifer Taylor.
Yeah, Jennifer did most of the video. We have quite a bit,
Video. That's
quite a
correct,
bit,
yes.
quite a bit of video footage from the trip,
Right.
which the Army just decided to do for us. And then Melissa was a photographer, so
Right.
it was everything was well documented, and I'm sure they used some of it, and they were gracious enough to send it back to us, so we could look at it. They're two special girls. Both Melissa has. She has, I think, 3 or 4 children, and the other young lady also has 3 or 4 children. So Jennifer. So they leave home. Their dads are back. Their husbands are back there taking care of the kids, or their moms and their dads are watching over the kids. And it's kind of really a selfless thing to do.
Yeah. We must never forget that when we say men and women in uniform, that's exactly what we mean, men and women. This is my favorite photograph of all of those. This is the Cross Sabers at Camp Prosperity. Talk about this.
Well, this is the marching grounds of where Saddam Hussein, whenever you saw photos of Saddam Hussein with the Republican Guard or shooting a gun up in the air, proclaiming victory, you know, this is the Crossing Sabers. There's a number of different names for this, but at the base of this is all Iranian helmets. And before the war was even over, before the Iraqi war with Iran was over, he proclaimed victory, which was sort of his personality. And he had placed Iranian helmets all the way through there. And the swords are actually, the iron for those swords was built with the artillery of fallen Iraqi soldiers. So there's a lot of significance there. Those hands are exact replicas of Saddam Hussein's, believe it or not, all the way down to fingerprints, that detailed. And these guys had never really been there. A lot of these people hadn't been to some of these sites before we were able to go on this trip. So they were happy to be there. We had an Aggie group there as well, as you can see, we're all represented.
Coach, we're out of time. I wish we had much more time. Your grandfather served in World War I. Your dad served in World War II. You had uncles that you had an uncle that served in Okinawa, I know, and many cousins that served in Vietnam. So I know that this meant a lot to you. And again, on behalf of Texas A&M and United States of America, thank you for taking this trip.
Well, it was an honor to go over there.
What? Without doubt, when Mike Sherman left Iraq on May the 8th, he heard, "Thanks for coming, Coach." Well, it was without doubt his honor and his privilege to stand shoulder to shoulder with true American heroes. We look forward to the safe return home of them all to their families. For Coach Mike Sherman, I'm Tom Turpeville. Join us next time on Veterans of the Valley.